Well, the result was that the thing was so heavy that people could walk faster going up the hill up toward the hospital. So it was not a very successful attempt, but anyway, we were mechanized. I still think the hose reels were faster, powered by human muscle.
It's interesting. It's obviously changed quite a bit from those days. Not just the fire department, but all of Caslow.
Oh yes, oh yes. When I saw the equipment that the fire department has here now, I was just appalled. I thought, this, I think we could do just as good a job with the hose reel, without all that fancy stuff. But anyway, Caslow is far more affluent now than it was in the 40s. They couldn't even think of $250,000.
Right.
The budget for the whole city was far
You know
less than
how
that.
I've heard, like, I guess it's around the turn of the century we had 28 saloons and all, like, it must have been very bustle hustle around here, right? But when you were a kid, what was it, like, what was around here?
It was absolutely dead. There were many derelict buildings that, even the Langham was in late stages of decay. The roof was gone.
So you were here when the whole Japanese internment was going on?
When we were told they were coming, an advanced group came in, mostly Japanese, to make these buildings habitable. I worked at Caslow Motor Transport at the time, and we had trucks going day and night, 3 shifts, back and forth to Nelson, hauling supplies in to lumber specifically to restore these buildings, to make them habitable. In the Langham, I remember some of those rooms, and they weren't that big, had bunks fastened to the wall, 3 tiers. Now, we have bunks in our little cabin out the back here, but only two levels, but these were 3. And I don't know how those people squeezed themselves into those little rooms. The sanitary equipment in the Langham, I think they may have had 2 toilets, and they had a cesspool out in the back, near the back alley. Now, a cesspool is just a hole in the ground lined with rocks and wooden timbers over the top. It did not function like a septic tank.
Right.
So they had problems with that. There were too many people for that sewage disposal. Another thing about the Langham was the heating. There was no central heating, of course. So each room had a queen heater, and these heaters had to be stoked with wood day and night, in the wintertime especially. So they had a night watchman, and he went around from stove to stove, putting in this mostly green hemlock. It was a poor fuel, and the result was that because it didn't burn completely or very efficiently, the chimneys were lined with creosote, and every once in a while that layer of creosote would catch fire, and the flames would shoot out the top of the chimney, and the fire alarm would ring, and everybody would run out in the snow until it burned itself out. Miraculously, there were no big fires while these old buildings were occupied, because almost certainly there would have been some fatalities if there had been. But, no, it was just blind luck, I guess, mostly.
And as a kid growing up, what would you have done for fun?
We had no organized sport, and this required a lot of creativity. We had to invent things and use our imaginations, and I still think there wasn't too much wrong with that. We developed an ability to improvise, to make do with whatever we had. One game was called Nobby.
Yeah, Nobby.
And that involved a piece of string with 2 short bits of garden hose tied to each end of the string. We searched around the neighborhood to find some neighbor's garden hose that we could chop up. And the other part of the equipment was a stick, just an ordinary willow stick. And you may have seen the cowboys in Argentina throwing these bandoleros or something. It's very similar to what we have.
Oh, yeah?
You throw these things and you can catch the string on a stick. And we call it knobby for some reason. I don't know why. The other sport was rolling tires, old car tires. We would form a tire gang, and it was sort of purposeless, I guess. We didn't have any goal in mind. Or another thing was hoops.
Oh wait, what did you guys do? Just roll the tires around?
Yeah,
and
just
had
roll
races,
the tires. Probably run into each other too. The other thing was hoops. We had a T-stick rolling a hoop off of a barrel, a metal hoop, or a band that went around a wooden barrel. And then we got into trouble a lot, breaking windows or something. I remember one time the lady gravedigger came to town from up past the cemetery. She was driving a team of horses down the back road, and we kids had built a fort near there, so we thought we'd throw snowballs at the horses. And we got into trouble over that. The horses could have spooked and caused some damage, but we were too ignorant to know that, or the consequences of our behavior. But
a couple of years ago, I saw a couple of kids on the hill going up to the school throwing apples at the cars that were driving by.
Yeah, well,
similar.
It's a modern version of the same thing. Our policeman in those days was Logan McPhee, and he called us on the mat over that and gave us a good dressing down. Caslow had its own police force at one time. The earliest name I can recollect is Jim Maisie's. He lived in the house that's just been restored at the corner of Washington and A, the lodge. That,
oh yeah. That was that old farmhouse.
It was a derelict.
Yeah.
Before these new people fixed it up. But that was the police.
They kept part of the old way.
Did they?
Yeah.
Well, that was the policeman's home, Jim Maisie's. And Logan McPhee followed that, I think, a few years. And then we brought in the provincial police. And that, I suppose, was paid for by the provincial government. But prior to that, the city of Caslow paid the policeman's salary.
You know what, I want to ask you, when you were saying that was no organized sports, but then you also told me your mum, Louie, was the goalie for the women's hockey team here in Caslow. That
was before my time. I wasn't even born when she was.
Tell us about it.
Well, I remember the name of the team was the Caslow Falcons. And both the men's hockey team and the women's hockey team had the same name. But the picture, apparently, of my mother in her goalie's suit is up in the new arena now.
I do think so, yes.
I must go up there and have a look at that.
Yes.
Was Queenie McQueen in that picture?
I think Queenie was a member of the team, yes. Queenie was my teacher in Caslow.
Was that her real name? I've heard that name around before.
I think it was Queenie McQueen.
We never knew her as anything else.
It's the only name I ever heard. But they lived in where Larry lives, down that greenhouse down.
Lawrence Campbell?
Lawrence
Campbell,
yes.
Larry Campbell. And the color of the house today is the same as it was
really?
100 years ago.
Uh-huh.
He's kept the same color scheme.